My mother demanded I apologize on stage at my graduation for the shame I brought our family, or she wouldn't attend. She thought she held all the cards. She had no idea what my father left in my name or what I was about to say into that microphone. The phone rang at 9:47 on a Friday night in May, and I remember the exact time because I was standing at my kitchen counter ironing the collar of the blouse I planned to wear under my graduation gown the next morning. I had ironed it 3 times. It didn't need ironing 3 times. I was ironing it because I couldn't sit still, because 13 years of night classes and double shifts and canceled vacations were about to end with a diploma being placed in my hand, and my body didn't know what to do with the anticipation. My phone buzzed against the counter next to the cedar recipe box that had belonged to my father. I saw the name on the screen and felt my stomach drop before I even answered. Julian, my little brother, almost never called. He texted sometimes, mostly on holidays, always short and cautious like he was writing them under supervision. A phone call from Julian at nearly 10 at night meant something was wrong. Julian. Scarlett. His voice was tight, low, the way people talk when they're in another room from someone and don't want to be overheard. I have to tell you something, and I don't want to tell you, and Mom is going to know I called, but I can't let you walk into that thing tomorrow without knowing. I set the iron down. I put my palm flat on the counter to steady myself. What's going on? She's not coming. I closed my eyes. It shouldn't have hurt. I had told myself for weeks not to expect her, that any hope I still carried for that woman was hope I owed nobody, least of all her. And yet the wave that hit me at those 3 words was so complete that I had to lean my forehead against the cabinet door for a second before I could speak again. Okay, I said quietly. That's her right. No, Scar, wait. Julian's voice cracked a little. It's worse than that. She said she would come, she said she'd be there, but there's a condition. A condition. She wants you to apologize, from the stage, publicly. I opened my eyes and stared at the cedar recipe box. My father had built it himself, small dovetail joints in the corners, a tiny brass hinge. Aunt Rosalind had given it to me on my 21st birthday and said he wanted you to have this, sweetheart, when the time was right. The top card, worn soft at the edges, was in my father's handwriting. Peach cobbler, his mother's recipe. I hadn't made it in years. I couldn't bring myself to. Apologize for what, Julian? My voice had gone flat. Say it. Say the words she said. He took a breath. She said, and I'm quoting her, she can stand up there in front of everyone and apologize for the shame she brought on this family, for running off, for embarrassing us, for putting herself above her mother. If she can do that, I'll sit in the front row. If she can't, then she chose this, and she chose it 13 years ago. I laughed. It was not a happy sound. It came out of me like something I hadn't given permission to leave. She wants me to stand in front of my professors, my classmates, and the university administration and apologize for what exactly? For leaving home at 19 because she told me to. For working 2 jobs to put myself through school. For finishing my master's degree at 32. Which one of those humiliates her, Julian? I know, he whispered. I know, Scar. I told her I wouldn't be the messenger. I told her it wasn't fair. And Marcus said I was being disrespectful and asked me to leave the room. There it was, Marcus. My stepfather of 10 years, the smiling man in the sport coats who called my mother sweetheart in public and stood just a little too close to Julian at Christmas dinners, always with a hand on his shoulder like he was steering him. I had never trusted him. I had told myself for a decade that my distrust was jealousy, was leftover grief for my father, was the ugly part of me that resented anyone who tried to fill his chair. I had made myself believe that. Julian, listen to me. I kept my voice steady. You did the right thing calling. You did. Where are you right now? In my car, in front of my apartment. I drove over as soon as I could get out of there. Good, stay there. Don't go back tonight. Come to the ceremony tomorrow if you want to. Come, don't come, I love you either way, but do not let her weaponize you against me tonight. Okay. Okay. And Julian. Yeah. Don't tell her I know, just let her think whatever she wants to think about what happens tomorrow. Please. There was a long pause on the line. Then he said, so quietly I almost missed it, "Are you going to do something, Scarlett?" I looked at the cedar box, at my father's handwriting, at the years and the empty chairs and the birthday cards that had stopped coming when I was 20 and the wedding I had watched from 100 miles away through Facebook photos because I hadn't been invited. "I'm going to give my speech, Julian. That's all. I'm going to give the speech I was asked to give." We hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a very long time, holding the iron in one hand and the phone in the other, and I felt something turn in me that I did not know how to name yet. For 13 years, I had been trying to earn my way back to a table that had thrown me out. Tonight, standing barefoot on my linoleum floor with my father's handmade box within arm's reach, I finally understood something so simple that I almost laughed again. The table had never been mine to earn back. And the woman guarding it had never been sorry, not once, not for anything. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I got maybe 2 hours in fragmented pieces, and by 4 in the morning I was up, sitting at my kitchen table in an old sweatshirt with a mug of tea I forgot to drink. The graduation ceremony was at 11. I was supposed to be at the auditorium by 9:30 for the processional lineup, and I was supposed to be at Dr. Whitfield's office by 9 to go over the final version of my speech. Dr. Kate Whitfield had approached me 8 weeks earlier, after my thesis defense, and asked if I would be willing to speak at commencement. Not as the valedictorian, the university didn't do that at the graduate level, but as what she called the voice of the returning student cohort. There were 43 of us that year who had come back to school after 5 or more years away. Some of us had raised children first. Some had served in the military. Some, like me, had simply been working since the age of 18 and had spent our entire 20s clawing toward this. Dr. Whitfield said she wanted someone from that group to speak. She said my thesis on rural hospital access had moved her. She said, and I remember this word for word, "I want you to tell them what it costs, Scarlett, and I want you to tell them what it's worth." I had written a lovely speech. It was 6 minutes long. It was warm and hopeful, and it mentioned my late father twice. It did not mention my mother at all. That version of the speech was sitting in a folder on my kitchen table at 4 in the morning. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, opened a blank document, and started writing something else. I didn't finish it right away. I got 2 paragraphs in and my hands started shaking so badly I had to stop. That's when I noticed the cedar recipe box again, sitting where it always sat, and I reached for it without thinking. I flipped through the cards. My father's handwriting on most of them, my grandmother's on a few. And then near the back, a card I had noticed 100 times and never really examined, a card with a peach cobbler recipe on the front, my father's writing, and a completely different handwriting on the back. Small, careful, feminine cursive. Not my mother's, not my grandmother's. "Rosalind," the note began. "If you're reading this, it's because I asked you to keep this box safe until Scarlett is ready. She'll be ready when she stops trying to earn her mother's approval and starts asking why she needed to earn it in the first place. When that day comes, please tell her about the account. Tell her everything. I love her. J.J. Joseph, my father." I sat down hard in my chair. I read it 3 more times. My hand stopped shaking and something colder and steadier took the place of the shake. The account, I didn't know what account. I didn't know what everything was, but I knew who did. I picked up my phone. Aunt Rosalind answered on the second ring, which was not unusual. She was 74 and slept badly and often took her coffee at 4:30 in the morning while she did the crossword. "Scarlett, honey, you should be sleeping. It's your big day." "Aunt Roz," my voice was very calm. "I just read the note on the back of the peach cobbler card." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then very softly she said, "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, I've been waiting for this call for 11 years. "What is the account, Aunt Roz?" "Not on the phone, honey, not right now. Are you at home?" "Yes." "Give me 30 minutes, I'm coming over, and Scarlett." "Yes." "Do not, under any circumstance, call your mother this morning. Do you understand me?" I wasn't going to. "Good girl, I'll be there." She hung up. I looked down at the note. at my father's small, careful invitation to a truth he had trusted a woman other than my mother to deliver, and I understood, in a way I could not yet fully articulate, that the speech I had been writing at my kitchen table was about to change again. The recipe card sat on the table next to my laptop. I read it once more. She'll be ready when she stops trying to earn her mother's approval and starts asking why she needed to earn it in the first place. I had spent 13 years asking the wrong question. Aunt Rosalind was going to help me ask the right one. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what I gave up. I was 19 when my mother threw me out of the house. The official reason, the one she told everyone at church and everyone in her book club and everyone in the neighborhood, was that I had become uncontrollable after my father's death. The real reason was that I had asked her, 3 weeks after my father's funeral, why she had already started dating a man from his insurance office. Marcus Bellwether, regional director. Smooth as glass, always with a compliment on his tongue for her and a slightly too long handshake for anyone else. I had asked her, "Mom, isn't it a little soon?" She had slapped me, not hard but not gently either. And then she had said very quietly, "You do not question me in my own house, not ever." 3 weeks after that, I came home from my community college class to find 2 garbage bags of my belongings on the front porch and the locks changed. Julian was 14. He had watched her do it, and he had not been allowed to speak to me for nearly a year afterward. I slept on Aunt Rosalind's couch for 6 months. She wasn't my aunt by blood. She had been my father's mother's best friend for 40 years, and she had known me since I was a baby. She was the only person in my father's world who had never liked my mother. My father, I would later come to understand, had known this. My father had planned for this. I moved into a studio apartment when I turned 20. I worked at a call center in the mornings and a diner at night, and I took 2 community college classes at a time, sometimes 3. I got my associates at 23. I got my bachelor's at 27. I worked at the hospital as a ward clerk starting at 25, and when I turned 30, I applied to the master's program in public health policy at the state university. In all those years, my mother spoke to me exactly 6 times. Twice at Aunt Rosalind's funeral for her husband, once at a cousin's wedding where she nodded at me across the reception hall, twice at Christmas dinners 2 years ago and last year when Julian had finally, quietly, insisted I be invited. And once on the phone last spring when she called to tell me that Julian was going through a hard time and that I should stop encouraging him to visit me because it was upsetting the household. That last call, I now understood, was the tell. I had been at Aunt Rosalind's kitchen table when it came in, and I had put it on speaker. Aunt Rosalind had listened to the whole thing, her mouth in a tight line, and after my mother hung up she had said only, "That woman has never once, in 50 years, called anyone to check on them. She calls to control them." Remember that. Marcus, I should say, had his own tells. He had made a comment once at that Christmas dinner 2 years ago about my father's old business. He had said, casually over pie, Joe always kept his best clients in that leather-bound book. Real old-fashioned. I told him 100 times to digitize it, but he wouldn't listen. He had said it like a memory, like a friend remembering a friend. Marcus had never met my father. My father had died 6 weeks before Marcus started dating my mother. Marcus and my father had worked at the same regional insurance firm, but in different offices in different cities. My father had been in the residential division. Marcus had been in commercial. They had, according to every account I had ever heard, exchanged perhaps 3 professional emails in their lives. Joe always kept his best clients in that leather-bound book. How would Marcus know that? I had filed the moment away. I hadn't done anything with it. I hadn't had the framework for it yet. I had just felt the small, cold click of something not being right, the way a nurse can walk past a hospital room and know, without knowing how she knows, that the patient inside is not okay. That was the year Marcus and my mother started what she called their family stewardship project. My mother chaired the Church Women's League. Marcus joined the local Rotary and started sponsoring a scholarship in my father's name, which the newspaper had covered with a big, flattering photo. My mother was profiled in a regional magazine as the woman who kept her family whole through unimaginable loss. Julian was slowly, gently, systematically discouraged from spending time with me. His phone calls got shorter. His texts got more careful. When I invited him to my thesis defense in March, he had said yes. And then, 20 minutes before it started, he had texted, "So sorry, Mom needs help with something urgent, rain check." I had cried in the university parking lot for 10 minutes and then gone in and defended my thesis anyway. Aunt Rosalind rang my doorbell at 5:03 that morning. She was carrying a canvas tote bag that looked heavy, and her eyes were the sharp, focused eyes of a woman who had been a legal secretary for 41 years and had not forgotten a single skill. "Sit down, honey," she said, setting the bag on my kitchen table. "Your father left you something, and your mother and that man have been sitting on top of it for 11 years. It is time you knew." She reached into the bag and pulled out a manila envelope, thick and worn at the edges. "He set up a trust for you before he died," she said. "He knew he was sick. He knew your mother. He gave me copies of everything. And Scarlett, your father's leather-bound client book, the one Marcus mentioned at that Christmas. It's in a safe deposit box. In your name, it has been since you were 16. Only you can open it." I sat down slowly. The peach cobbler recipe was still on the counter, my father's handwriting on the front, and on the back, a message 11 years in the making, finally read. Outside, the sun was starting to come up on the day of my graduation. Aunt Rosalind spread the contents of the manila envelope across my kitchen table like a woman dealing cards. There was a trust document, dated 11 months before my father's death. There was a letter, in his handwriting, addressed to me. There was a key on a small brass ring with a paper tag that read First Meridian Bank, Box 4471. There was a copy of a signature card. There were 3 separate insurance policy statements, all naming me as sole beneficiary, all showing balances that had been paid out, but not to me. I picked up the trust document first. My hands were steady now, which surprised me. "He set it up quietly," Aunt Rosalind said. "Your grandmother helped him. He didn't tell your mother. He told me because he needed a co-signer he could trust, and he told the bank because he had to. Nobody else." "How much?" I said. "When he died, the trust held about $420,000 in investments. It was supposed to release to you at 25, in phases, with a final distribution at 30. I looked up at her. "Aunt Roz, I never got any of it." "I know, sweetheart. I never got a letter from a bank. I never got a phone call. Nobody ever told me a trust existed." "I know," her mouth was tight. "That's what we need to talk about." She slid the insurance statements toward me. My father, it turned out, had held 3 policies through his employer. 2 were standard life insurance. 1 was a supplemental policy specifically earmarked, in his own signed intent letter, for his children's education. All 3 had paid out shortly after his death. All 3 had been deposited into a joint household account controlled by my mother. None of the money had ever reached me. None of it had ever reached Julian, either, so far as Aunt Rosalind knew. "The trust is a separate issue," she said. "The trust is protected. Your name is on it. Your social security number is on it. Nobody can touch that principle without you. What I don't know, what we need to find out today, is whether they've been trying." "Trying how?" "Contested claims, fraudulent guardianship filings. Anything they might have attempted in the years after your father died, when you were 19 and gone and easy to write out of the story." She tapped the trust document. "That client book of your father's is in the safe deposit box. Your father told me before he passed that the book had names in it that weren't just clients. He said, and I'm quoting him, 'Roz, some of those names are why I'm sick, and some of those names are why I need to make sure my daughter is protected.'" I felt the room go quiet around me. "Aunt Roz, what does that mean?" "I don't know exactly. Your father was a good man in a business that wasn't always good. He didn't tell me the details because he didn't want me to be in danger. What I know is that Marcus Bellwether worked commercial insurance at the same firm, and I know that some of the names your father was worried about were commercial accounts, and I know that 6 weeks after your father's funeral, Marcus Bellwether was sitting at your mother's kitchen table drinking her coffee." I stood up, I sat back down, I stood up again. "The bank opens at 9, I said. The bank opens at 9 and your ceremony is at 11 and Dr. Whitfield is expecting you at 9 sharp. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Scarlett, listen to me carefully. You have a decision to make. You can walk into that ceremony today and give the beautiful speech you already wrote, and we can go to the bank on Monday. Or you can rearrange your morning. I looked at her. Aunt Roz, who else knows about the trust? Only me and the bank. Not Julian. Not Julian. Your father was afraid, rightly, as it turned out, that anything he told a 14-year-old boy could be gotten out of him by that mother of yours. And the client book. Is there any way Marcus knows it exists? Aunt Rosalind considered this for a long moment. He might suspect. He mentioned it at Christmas, you told me. He knows the culture of that office. He might have looked for it in your father's things after they married and not found it, but he doesn't know where it is. He can't know. Your father made sure of that. I sat very still. I thought about the last 13 years. I thought about the 2 garbage bags on the porch. I thought about Julian, 20 minutes before my thesis defense, texting Mom needs help with something urgent. I thought about Marcus's hand on Julian's shoulder at Christmas dinner, steering. I thought about my father, dying, quietly building a fortress for a daughter he knew was going to be attacked. I'm going to the bank, I said. And then I'm going to give my speech. And I'm going to give a very different speech than the one in that folder. Aunt Rosalind smiled at me. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a 74-year-old legal secretary who had waited 11 years to hear those exact words. I hoped you'd say that. Get dressed. I'll drive. I called Dr. Whitfield from the passenger seat at 7:45. I told her I had a family emergency and asked if I could send her a revised version of my speech by 10 instead of coming in at 9 to review. She was kind about it, the way she always was. She said, Scarlett, whatever you send me, I trust. I'll cue it into the teleprompter myself. I hung up and started writing. Aunt Rosalind drove. The bank was 22 minutes away. I had a speech to rewrite and, as it turned out, one more thing to do, a phone call I had not planned to make when I woke up that morning, but which I understood now was going to be necessary. I called an old classmate from my master's program named Renata Bishop, who had graduated a year ahead of me and now worked for the state insurance regulator's office. Renata and I had worked on a policy paper together in our second semester. She had told me at the end of it, half joking, if you ever need a favor from a state auditor, Scarlett, you have one. Renata, it's Scarlett Marchetti, I'm calling in the favor. She laughed, today, on your graduation morning. Today, this morning. I need to know if you can pull the licensing and complaint history on someone by 10 a.m. His name is Marcus Bellwether. He's a regional director at Continental Meridian Insurance. I have reason to believe there may be irregularities in his handling of client accounts going back over a decade. The line went quiet for a second. Scarlett, this is serious. I know. Send me his full name, date of birth if you have it, and employer. I'll see what's already flagged in the system. If there's anything active, I'll know in an hour. Thank you, Renata, truly. Get to your graduation, Scarlett, and congratulations. I hung up as Aunt Rosalind pulled into the bank parking lot. The safe deposit box at First Meridian Bank was small, the size of a large shoebox, and it was heavier than I expected. Aunt Rosalind waited in the little private room with me while I lifted the lid. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, dark green, worn at the spine. There was also a sealed envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting, and a smaller envelope marked for Rosalind, in case. I opened my letter first. I had to. My Scarlett, if Rosalind has given you this, then either I am gone or your mother has done something I can no longer protect you from. I am writing this in September, and my doctor tells me I have maybe 8 months. I am spending those months making sure you land on your feet. Baby, your mother is not a well woman. She loves the version of us she can display. She does not love the version of us that inconveniences her. I have watched her do this to my mother, to my sister, and I am watching her begin to do it to you. I will not let her finish. The trust is yours. The bank will explain everything. Rosalind has the cosigner paperwork. You do not need your mother's permission for anything in that trust, and she does not, legally, know it exists. I did that on purpose. The book you are holding is a different matter. It is a client ledger from my last 4 years at Continental Meridian. There are 2 sections. The front section is my regular clients. The back section, starting on page 84, is a private log I kept because I could not report what I was seeing without more proof. There are names in that back section who I believe were being defrauded through a commercial policy scheme run out of the commercial division. I could not prove it in time. I could only document it and hide it. One of the names in the back section is a man named Marcus Bellwether. He was not, at the time I made this log, a friend of this family. If he ever becomes one, Scarlett, if he ever becomes one, you take this book to the State Insurance Commission. Not to the police first. To the commission, they have the authority, they will act. I love you more than anything I ever did or made in this world. I am so proud of the woman you are becoming. Go be her. Dad, I read it twice. I did not cry. That surprised me, and it also didn't because some griefs live so deep in you that when they are finally answered, they don't cry out, they exhale. I opened the ledger to page 84. Marcus's name was the 3rd entry. There were notes next to it in my father's small, tight handwriting. Policy numbers. Client complaints. A cross-reference to a client named Ellen Vasquez who had, according to my father's notes, been overcharged by nearly $40,000 on a commercial umbrella policy that had been unnecessarily replaced twice. There were 17 names in the back section. 17, my phone buzzed. It was Renata. Scarlett, I've got 3 open compliance flags on Marcus Bellwether going back to 2019. Nothing has stuck because there's never been a complainant willing to testify. But there's a pattern. If you have documentation from before 2019, you would be handing us the missing piece of an investigation that has been slow-walking for 4 years. Renata, I said, I have documentation going back to the year 2013. The line was silent for a long, long moment. Scarlett, when can I have it? I'm at the bank right now. I can have Aunt Rosalind photograph the relevant pages and send them to your official state email within 30 minutes. The originals stay with me until I can hand them to your office in person on Monday. Send them now. And Scarlett, do not let anyone in your family know you have this, not until my office has it in hand. I have no intention of telling them, Renata. I have a very different plan. We hung up. Aunt Rosalind was already pulling out her phone, which she had upgraded last year specifically so she could take clear pictures of documents, because she had never fully stopped being a legal secretary. How many pages, honey? All 17 in the back, and the cover page, and page 1 for authentication. She started photographing. I sat with my father's letter in my lap, and I looked at his handwriting and I thought, I am so sorry it took me this long, Dad. I am here now. We left the bank at 9:40. I was in the car and in my cap and gown by 10:05. I had finished rewriting my speech at a red light on Fillmore Avenue. Dr. Whitfield met me at the auditorium's stage door at 10:30. She took one look at me and said, "Whatever happened this morning, I hope you're okay." I am, Dr. Whitfield. I am actually more okay than I have been in 11 years. Good. She handed me the new draft, which I had emailed her at 10:15. This is a different speech than the one you sent me last week. Yes. It's a much braver speech, Scarlett. Is it cued? It's cued, word for word. She met my eyes. You know your family is in the 3rd row on the left. I saw the reserved cards. I nodded. I had not expected my mother to come. I had planned for her not to come. But I had also, in the back of my mind, prepared for her to come because a woman like Corinne Marchetti would want to see me apologize. She would want the witness. She would want to be photographed in the front row of a graduation she had almost boycotted, wearing her generous smile, her hand resting on Marcus's arm. Dr. Whitfield, I said, there's one more thing I need to ask you. I told her quickly what I intended to do. I told her about Renata. I told her about the document that would go live to specific recipients at the exact moment I reached a specific paragraph in the speech. I told her that if she wanted me to give the original speech instead, I would understand completely. I was, after all, a student, and this was her ceremony. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Scarlett, I've been organizing this commencement for 14 years. I have never once been prouder of a graduate. Give the speech you wrote this morning." The processional began at 11 sharp. I walked in the line of graduates down the center aisle of the auditorium, my cap slightly crooked because I had not had time to pin it properly, and I saw them in the third row on the left before I was even halfway to the stage. My mother was in a cream-colored dress with a small pearl brooch. She looked radiant. She looked, I realized, like a woman who had already decided how this story was going to end and had come to enjoy the ending. Marcus was next to her in a navy blazer, one arm draped along the back of her chair. Julian was on her other side. His hands were in his lap, his face was pale. She caught my eye as I passed. She smiled. It was a small, private, victorious smile. I did not smile back. I did not glare either. I simply looked at her, held her eyes for one full second, and kept walking. I took my seat with the graduates. The ceremony proceeded through its opening rituals. The provost welcomed the families. The dean of my school gave her remarks. The honorary degree was conferred on a retired epidemiologist who had spent 40 years working on rural health outcomes. And then Dr. Whitfield stood at the podium and said the words I had been walking toward for 13 years. It is my honor now to introduce the speaker representing our returning student cohort. 43 graduates today began their academic journeys more than a decade ago and have returned to complete them. Their voice this morning is Scarlett Marchetti, Master of Public Health Policy, whose thesis on rural hospital access has already been cited in 2 state legislative briefings. Please welcome her. I stood up. I walked to the podium. I set down my folder. I did not open it. I did not need to. I looked out at the auditorium, at my professors, at my classmates and their families, at Aunt Rosalind in the 5th row on the right with her hands folded in her lap, at Dr. Whitfield's sitting stage left with her tablet ready, at my mother's cream dress and Marcus's navy blazer and Julian's pale, terrified face. And I began. Thank you, Dr. Whitfield. Thank you to the faculty of this school, who have given more of themselves to a class of tired, overworked, returning students than I think any of us knew how to ask for. And thank you to the 42 other graduates sitting behind me who came back. I paused. The auditorium was very quiet. I was asked to speak this morning about what it costs to come back to school after years away and what it's worth. I had a speech prepared about that. It was a good speech. I'm not going to give it today. I saw my mother's smile flicker, just slightly. I'm going to talk instead about something my father told me before he died when I was 17 years old. He told me that the hardest thing a person can do is tell the truth about the people they love, out loud, when the people they love have been counting on their silence. Marcus shifted in his seat. His arm came down off the back of the chair. My father died when I was 17. He knew he was dying. In the months before he died, he did something extraordinary. He wrote letters, he set up protections, he documented what he had seen at his workplace, and he entrusted all of it to a family friend because he could not entrust it to his own wife. The auditorium was so quiet now that I could hear the ceiling fans. I am not going to spend this speech telling you what was in those documents. That is a matter now for the State Insurance Commission, which received a portion of them at 9:42 this morning. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at Marcus. I kept my eyes on the back of the auditorium, on a red exit sign above the far doors, because I had promised myself I would. What I am going to tell you is this. I left home at 19 because I asked a question my mother did not want asked. I put myself through 8 years of undergraduate study working 2 jobs. I have not been welcomed at a family holiday in 13 years, with 2 exceptions in the last 2 years that came with conditions. Last night, at 9:47, I received a phone call informing me that my mother would attend this ceremony only if I stood at this podium and publicly apologized for the shame I had brought on our family. A soft gasp moved through the auditorium. I want to be very clear about what I am doing right now so that no one in this room misunderstands me. I am not apologizing. I have nothing to apologize for. I am, instead, telling the truth my father asked me to tell, on the day he trusted I would be ready to tell it. I finally looked at the third row on the left. My mother's face had gone the color of her dress. Marcus was staring at the floor. Julian was staring at me, and his eyes were wet, and his hands were no longer in his lap. To the returning students behind me, I said, my voice steady, and to every person who has ever been told they should be quieter, smaller, more grateful, more ashamed, you do not owe an apology for surviving what was done to you. You owe yourself the truth. And when you can finally afford to tell it, tell it. I paused. I let the moment breathe. I have one more thing to say, and then I will sit down and we will continue with the ceremony as scheduled. I took a small breath. At exactly this moment, a document is being delivered by secure email to 7 recipients, including the State Insurance Commissioner's Office, the Compliance Division of Continental Meridian Insurance, and 2 members of the press who cover regulatory matters in this state. The document is not mine to summarize here. It speaks for itself. It is the reason I asked to be allowed to speak this morning. I looked once more briefly at my mother. She was not looking at me. She was looking at Marcus. And Marcus was looking, for the first time since I had known him, like a man who had just realized the ground was gone. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, "and congratulations to the class." I walked back to my seat. The applause started slowly, uncertainly, and then built into something long and loud that I could not fully hear over the sound of my own heartbeat. I did not look at my mother again. I did not need to. I had said everything I needed to say. The rest of the ceremony proceeded in a strange, suspended quiet. Names were called. Diplomas were handed across the stage. When my name was called, Scarlett Marchetti, Master of Public Health Policy, I walked across the stage, shook the provost's hand, took the leather folder holding my degree, and turned to face the auditorium. I saw the third row on the left. The 3 chairs were empty. I don't know exactly when they left. Somewhere between the end of my speech and the beginning of the diploma ceremony, my mother, Marcus, and Julian had walked out. 2 of them, at least, had walked out. I would find out later that Julian had followed at a distance and then stopped in the lobby and sat down on a bench and stayed there. Aunt Rosalind was still in the 5th row on the right. She had not moved. When our eyes met, she pressed one hand over her heart and nodded at me once, slowly, deliberately, the way a person nods when there are no words available that would be big enough. I walked back to my seat with my diploma. I sat down. I looked at the folder in my lap. I ran my thumb along the embossed edge of it. 13 years, that folder. 13 years of night classes and canceled vacations and shifts I picked up so I could pay for one more textbook. 13 years, and it fit in my hands. When the ceremony ended and the recessional began, I walked out with the rest of the graduates. In the lobby, Julian was on the bench near the coat check. He stood up when he saw me. He didn't come toward me. He waited. I walked over to him. "Julian." "Scarlett," his voice was small. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. About any of it, about the money, about Dad, about Marcus, about what he stopped. His mouth worked for a second. "I didn't know." "I know, Julian. Where do I go now?" I looked at my little brother, 28 years old and holding himself like a 14-year-old boy who had just watched his sister's belongings put out on a porch. "You come with me and Aunt Roz," I said. "We're going to lunch. You can decide the rest tomorrow." He nodded. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Aunt Rosalind appeared at my elbow with her small, quiet efficiency and took Julian's other arm, and the 3 of us walked out of the auditorium together into the May afternoon. My mother and Marcus were not in the parking lot. I don't know where they went. I didn't ask. The State Insurance Commission opened its formal investigation the following Tuesday. Renata Bishop called me on Wednesday morning to tell me that the documents from my father's ledger had, combined with the 3 open compliance flags her office had been carrying, produced what she called a rare situation where an investigation moves from cold to hot in 72 hours. Marcus Bellwether was placed on administrative leave from Continental Meridian by the end of the week. His professional license was suspended pending investigation within 3 weeks. The formal charges: 3 counts of insurance fraud, 1 count of racketeering, 1 count of falsification of client records, came down 4 months later. Ellen Vasquez, the client whose name my father had circled in his ledger, agreed to testify. 2 other clients from the 17 name list came forward within the first month. By the time the case reached its plea stage the following spring, Marcus had accepted a settlement that included the surrender of his license, restitution to 11 identified victims, and a suspended prison sentence with 5 years of probation. He would never work in insurance again. He would never work in any regulated financial industry again. My mother's world came apart more slowly and, in some ways, more completely. The Church Women's League quietly asked her to step down from her chairmanship. The regional magazine that had once profiled her declined to return her calls. The scholarship in my father's name, which Marcus had sponsored, was withdrawn by the company. A small notice appeared in the paper explaining that the sponsor had resigned his affiliation. My mother's book club stopped meeting at her house. Her Christmas card list, Aunt Rosalind told me later with something like grim satisfaction, shrank to about a quarter of its former size within a year. She did not call me, not once. I did not call her either. The trust released to me in full 3 weeks after graduation. $420,000, which had grown over the 11 years it sat untouched to a little over $680,000. I did not spend it recklessly. I paid off my student loans. I paid off Aunt Rosalind's remaining mortgage over her fierce and unsuccessful objections. I set aside a portion for Julian, in a trust of his own that he could not access for 2 years, because I had learned from my father how to protect the people you love from the people who might still be trying to reach them. The rest I invested. I kept my job at the hospital at first because I liked it, and because I had earned it, and because the master's degree opened a promotion path there that I intended to walk. Within 18 months, I had moved into the hospital's community health division as a policy coordinator. Within 3 years, I was running the department. Julian moved out of our mother's orbit slowly. He did not, at first, cut her off. He is not built the way I am built. His forgiveness runs longer and softer. But he moved into his own apartment across town from her within 2 months of graduation. He came to Sunday dinner at Aunt Rosalind's every week. He met me for coffee on Wednesdays. He told me, 6 months in, that our mother had asked him to choose between her and me, and that he had said, very quietly, "I'm not going to do that, Mom. Not anymore." He said she had cried and told him he was ungrateful. He said he had put on his coat and left. He is, today, a better brother than I ever hoped to have back. That is the part of this story I do not have words for. That is the part I do not try to explain. Aunt Rosalind and I make peach cobbler now sometimes on Sunday afternoons. My father's recipe. The card is still in the cedar box, and the note on the back is still there in my grandmother's careful cursive. Because it was my grandmother's handwriting, we figured out later, transcribing my father's dictation in the last weeks of his life, when his hands had begun to shake too badly to write. That was the last small piece of the puzzle. My grandmother had known. My grandmother had helped him. My grandmother had trusted Aunt Rosalind to trust me. I keep the box on my kitchen counter. I do not need to open it any more to remember what is inside. I remember. I remember every day. My mother, I heard through a cousin last Christmas, moved to a smaller town 3 hours away. She lives in a condominium now. She attends a different church. She tells people, apparently, that her daughter is a public health executive in the state capital, and that her son is doing well, and that she is very proud of both of them. She does not tell them that she has not spoken to either of us in almost 2 years. I do not wish her harm. I do not wish her well either. I wish her, mostly, nothing, which is, I have come to believe, the honest ending to the kind of story we shared. On the morning of my graduation, I stood at a podium and told the truth my father had asked me to tell. On the day he trusted I would be ready to tell it. He was right about the day. He was right about me. And that, in the end, is what I earned in those 13 years. Not the diploma, not the trust, not even the vindication. The right to be the daughter he had known I could be.